We have a session right now where we're going to have a discussion with Len Knee, who's here from the University of Minnesota. Len is Associate Director of U-Spatial at the University of Minnesota. And for those of you who don't know or haven't heard of it, U-Spatial is a center at the University of Minnesota that provides support campus-wide for geospatial research. Len himself has an extensive experience with GIS and information technologies in higher education, in construction, government, nonprofit organizations. He's also on the faculty in the MGIS or Master of GIS program at Geography at the University of Minnesota. He teaches courses in GIS project management, spatial databases, and some variety of graduate seminar classes focusing on the use of technology in GIS. So we asked Len to come and talk to us about U-Spatial, how it operates, how it successfully serves the needs of a very diverse community across the University of Minnesota campus. My hope is that we can draw some analogies between University of Minnesota and the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and think about how the successes of U-Spatial might translate into future evolution of an organization like the Geospatial Alliance, which is hosting this event. So I believe Len's going to talk for 15 or 20 minutes, is that right?
As long as
he's run out of steam, and then we'll have some time for discussion. Thanks, Len.
All right, can you hear me in the back? Good, all right. Thanks, Howard. Thanks to Howard and Brenda for inviting me here. This is really a great summit. I'm going back with a lot of good ideas and a lot of good information, so I'm glad to be here for a couple reasons. I'm glad to be here to tell you a little bit about U-Spatial. I'm going to tell you the story of how we got started, how we're going, and where we're at now, and what it looks like in the future. Stop for some questions. If it's quiet, got more slides, I'm ready for you. We'll dig a little deeper into some of that, what I think are the cool projects that we've been working on lately. So, U-Spatial, here's our big long mission. I'll give you a second to read it. We're academics, right? We've got this big long mission statement. It's really support for spatial research. I mean, that's what we do. And we're doing a pretty good job so far. It came about through a lot of work. There are a lot of centers at the university that are doing some form of spatial research. This is some of them. I know there's some missing in there. But there's a lot of people that are doing research. It's using spatial. They didn't necessarily talk to each other, right? We get a little bit siloed within universities. And the idea of U-Spatial was to try and bring people together, start making good use of some of the resources, to share, to collaborate. Transdisciplinary research, that's our new buzz term. It's going on here as well. To do some collaboration. And so U-Spatial came about, I did put this in here, a long time in the works. Way back in the creating a land grant management information system. It's actually about when I was born, so I wasn't working on that project. But the timeline shows that we've been working on this for a long time. U-Spatial is just about ready to reach its 3rd birthday. And we did lots of surveys. We did lots of symposia looking at what do we need to do to bring this geospatial community together at the university. We did some more surveys. We did a lot of talking. What really got it going was an Infrastructure Investment Initiative grant. This is put on by our Office of Vice President for Research, OVPR, and it makes money available to build research infrastructure. A lot of time that seems like maybe it's microscopes, it's equipment. We took it as more of the technologies, the whole geospatial infrastructure that you can put together. We'll talk more about what that means. OVPR had this out in 2009. They did a pre-proposal, a couple pages. OVPR gave the thumbs up. They did the next stage, full proposal. Really, the cat's out of the bag, right? Because we end up getting the proposal. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. I'd be sitting in a basement in some government office coding somewhere is probably what I'd be doing. We had a lot of happy geospatial people back in 2011 when U-Spatial finally got off the ground. And this is what really gets it going. You think of the carrots and the sticks, how do you bring things together? Money helps. It helps to bring people together and start working. We have $2.5 million over a 5-year period. We have 13 different departments and colleges that kicked in funds. OVPR did a 2-to-1 match with that. That gave the units could get their original contribution back, in most cases double their money. So win for them, they get to double their money. We also get a third of that money to go to the central core, and that's where we do a lot of what people see visually as U-Spatial, the services, our help desk and training. And I'll get into what that's about. It's broad support. This is one of the reasons why OVPR was very excited to work through this. This is the list of the original 13 contributors. It's everywhere. It's from natural resources to public health, to public policy, to the libraries, to our Office of Technology. Very, very broad support. And really to pull this together, there's one person who kind of drives all this, and in our case it was Steve Manson. Another person is Francis Harvey, who's the director of U-Spatial. Those two people is what you need to really bring an initiative like this together. You've got to go knock on deans' doors, get their commitments, and move forward with that. And this all started in 2011. It's been going really great. Structurally, we divide ourselves into 4 cores. There's a central core, which is where I spend most of my day, an imaging core, data core, and an analysis core. Imaging core is the remote sensing folks. It's an established lab over on our St. Paul campus. They've been doing a lot of remote sensing work. They saw this as a really great win. They kick in some money and double it for research. That's a really common scenario with our originating partners is take your money, double it, continue doing the great research you've been doing. The data core, this has been a collaboration with the libraries, with OIT, with our administrative GIS, folks working in facility management types. And we're looking at how do we store data. And actually I'll talk about this later. This is Open GeoPortal, and I know there's a talk coming up later in the afternoon because people are using it here in Madison as well. This one's kind of fun. It's Open GeoPortal of the Antarctic. People who do web mapping, WebMercator doesn't work so well when you get to the poles. So we've been doing some work with that, of how do you deal with web mapping when you're in north-south pole.
You're used to that in Minnesota.
Exactly, yeah. We have a Polar Geospatial Center at the university, and they send GIS people down to Antarctica, down in McMurdo Bay, and we constantly get reports of them being warmer than Minneapolis. It's just really sad. It is summer down there, but it's Antarctica. The analysis core, a couple different units here. This is looking at geodesign, and hopefully I'll have time to dig into this project a little bit more. We're having some fun with that. Computer science is doing a lot of work with a couple faculty there. We're seeing work with the Institute on the Environment taking their funds. So a lot of different groups. CURE, our Center for Urban and Regional Affairs, doing more of an outreach program. So each group gets to take their money and again go with the different research that they focused on. Then we get to the central core. And again, this is where I spend most of my days working on really fun projects with a really great staff. We started out with 1 research assistant, and we've grown to over 7. They do most of the work. I go to meetings. They do great things. It's been actually a win-win for the university. They're primarily master's in GIS students. They're getting really good work experience. We run it kind of like a consulting company. That's my background. And so they get a chance to work on some real projects that way as well. I almost think of it as staff augmentation in a way, because we're looking at that model for going after research assistants instead of an individual faculty buying an entire research assistant. Maybe they just want pieces of different research assistants. We've got somebody who's good at cryptography. We've got some good developers. Somebody that's good with databases. So to split that up.
Are you limited just to public sector clients?
We are limited to university clients. Yeah, we're completely internal. We've looked at external, and we probably won't go there. It's out of our mission. Yeah. We do a lot of training. The most popular one is GIS 101, one-day workshop. We put over 1,000 people in through that workshop. It's fun. You get people when they come in from different disciplines. They think they're going to get their 7 hours training. Right now we're teaching on desktop, and they're going to go out and do all their research, and they quickly realize you can't learn ARC desktop in 7 hours. But it's really good at showing them what's possible in GIS, and that's what we're trying to reach with them. It's probably our #1 marketing tool as far as getting people into the help desk to help them out, or even into consulting projects. And we'll actually be moving GIS 101 next year to online, because teach fundamentals, you don't need to do that learning curve of learning desktop. Focus on the fundamentals of spatial, and then we'll do a GIS 102 if they want to get into workshops. Into desktop. We do a letter class, we do a cartography class, we've got a business analyst class coming. We're trying to, we actually just hired a halftime training coordinator, one of our new hires. So we're ramping that piece of it up. I'll show later, and I heard earlier in comments earlier session that it's hard to find qualified students and staff. We did a survey. That's actually the #1 thing researchers told us. They can't find people to do the work. So we spent a lot of time trying to get people interested in GIS, getting them trained up. We don't compete with 4-credit classes. We don't want to do that. We want to be just the individual workshops. We also don't recreate anything that's out there in Esri or in the open source world. It's unique kind of information. Did you have your hand up, AJ?
Yeah, just brief. I was curious, are these courses taught by graduate students?
Primarily, yeah. Once in a while I get to sneak in there and do them, but most of the time I don't do that anymore. That's actually me, and that's actually younger than most of our students. Teaching a grade school class one day. So, we've got that halftime training coordinator who does some. He's recently graduated MGIS, and then we've got 2 different RAs who split up some of the trainings. And they're primarily free. We've been looking at different models of charging. We do charge $40 for the LiDAR, and that seems to work okay. It's actually harder for us to charge money right now, to take money from people, than it's worth. We're working on that. I'll talk about that with where we're going in the next couple of years. And we're exploding. We're growing, not exponentially, but 2011 we were only open for November and December, so that's kind of a little misleading. But we've been quickly increasing the number of people who are using the help desk services, using the training services. I did say there's over 1,000 people through GIS 101. That course has been going on for another 3-4 years before this, so we've got a bunch of people in that end of it. It's taking off, and I know you're not going to be able to read this, and well, if you can, get better eyes than I do, but this is a list of the different departments, colleges, units that use our services. OBPR loves this list. It's the length of it that's really kind of fun, the breadth of it. We've touched every college, most departments. On our Twin Cities campus, we've touched our coordinating campuses, so Duluth, Morris, Crookston, Rochester. Up until a couple months ago, I had to say we touched almost every college because we didn't have a law school. We finally got them 2 months ago, so it's just like, yeah. So it's breadth. It's really across the university that are taking and using these services. And the GIS experts, the people who've been around for a long time, they've really embraced having the help desk there. They no longer have to take these questions, what's a shapefile? How do I join them? They just send them to the help desk. When we do get help desk questions that we can't handle, we kick them back to the experts, and they're happy to get them. They're the challenging questions. They often lead to collaboration with working with people. So they like that connection there. Sometimes we've been described as a concierge, making these connections there. Not going to say matchmaker, I guess, but in a way it feels like that. So we do consulting. I mean, you already know this. GIS is everywhere on campus. I think a lot of disciplines don't realize how much they have to do with spatial, and once they start thinking about it. This is the fun part of my job. I get to go in and work with researchers across the entire university system. Learn a little bit about everything and really not know much at all. So what's really been fun about this is we've been growing into departments that traditionally haven't used GIS. A couple big examples is nursing. And the way it happened is one faculty came and took the GIS 101 class, saw what was possible, and the rest of her colleagues started using it. And we're at a point now where we're developing a custom training for the nursing program because they're into it. They're using it for a public participation, web map. It's called the Age-Friendly Cities. It's an international health organization. I might be reading that. World, thank you, WHO. Initiative looking at it as people age. You need to make cities friendly, curbs cuts, lighting, safety centers. And they put it into a MOOC, and it's worldwide. People can go and start plotting really different positives, negatives, strengths, and concerns are across the world with that. So, growing. Consulting is growing. It's becoming enough now that we're trying to figure out how do we manage that. It was fun when we started. We could just take on everything. We're kind of hitting those growing pains now. How do we manage more work than we can deal with? We do a lot of activities. We don't have an activity that's anything like this summit. We have a symposium that goes on every year. I wish I could get the attendance that I see here today, so we're going to work on that one. We do a lot of user groups, brown bags, bringing technology experts together mostly. We do a spatial speaker series. We help fund departments when they want to bring somebody in. We'll help fund that. We do some GIS day. We had a big mapping prize that brought in entries from around the university, trying to draw more undergrads into thinking about it, trying to put more GIS into the classroom. Be thinking about that. I think what else? A little tidbit that popped in my mind with this one is when I started the job, we had a mailing list that had 87 people on it. I did my undergrad and graduate work at the university, and I thought I knew everybody who did GIS, and I thought that list was complete. Today it's over 1,300 people who are doing some form of spatial research. Most of them wouldn't consider themselves spatial researchers at all. They just got some component in their research that makes use of GIS, remote sensing, something spatial. And we do a lot of coordination work. We do Arcgis Online. I'm managing the subscription for the university there. We are taking over all the Esri licensing. I heard virtual campus earlier, student licensing, getting that shared out to people. We do a lot of marketing, just letting people know what's available as far as resources for spatial research. And we do surveys. We still do surveys. The one I want to highlight now is we did one in spring. Not a lot of respondents, but really representative of the university. And it really reinforced where we're going. I'd already mentioned this. Number one concern of researchers, finding qualified students and staff. And so that's why we've been working on the training, working on the outreach to get people thinking about GIS and how they can use it. I joke, Minnesota also just got that K through 12 license from Esri. And so we're helping teachers to get that into their classrooms, and it's like, this is my next RA coming up here in 8 years, so we can put them to work. So
What are the units you're using there?
it's a Likert scale 1 to 4. I'm not even gonna say what the high was. It's a mean of the score.
Nice.
I will look it up. I'm not forgetting what the top value was. Staying up to date with software, maintaining data. Data's a big theme. I mean, I'm sure it's a big theme here. How do you deal with the data? How do you deal with data management plans? and I can talk about that too later if we have time. What can U-Spatial do to help out with your research? Provide advanced GIS training. Again, that's why we brought the GIS coordinator, training coordinator on to help with that, build up that part of it. So, where we're going, like I said, we're about 3 years in. We're going to focus on the central core and the data core kind of functionality. So the help desk, the training, the workshops, the consulting, that all goes forward. We'll work with data. How do you make data discoverable, accessible, archive and preserve, the whole life cycle there. We also have a plan working with providing space for researchers to store their spatial data, whether that's in a file system, preferably in some sort of a database system, help them with metadata, help them with different things like that. Also providing services such as geocoding services or other geospatial processing servers on some internal resources here at the university. And we're going to expand a little bit more into support for teaching. We're already doing this. I mean, you can't separate research from teaching. Faculty do both. Our original grant said we needed to focus on research, so we tend to work research into everything. We're not going to change a lot in what we're doing. We're not going to look at teaching courses. There's a meeting in Santa Barbara, I'm going to forget what it was called, back in December of last year. They talked about embedding GIS into courses, and that's what we're already doing. I think we want to continue to do is help faculty and other instructors get GIS tools into their work, into their classrooms, and help out with that way. And then it's going to go into their research, or vice versa. If you get them using their research, it's going to go in the classroom. We're focusing on the long tail of researchers. We're focusing on the people who don't have these big multi-million-dollar grants, right? Or the people who are very smart GIS researchers, remote sensing researchers. They've got the tools, they've got the technology, they've got the money resources to buy what they need. We're focusing more on the people who are just learning to use GIS. So we're seeing a lot of that in public health, in the academic health, nursing, vet medicine, business school, public policy and planning. The College of Design is using it a lot. That's our kind of our area of focus. And we'll have this common good list of services. Most of them we're doing now. The data locker is that plan for providing some storage space and managed space for helping people store data. We've got a big high resolution imagery project coming in, community building, software licensing. Right, we've all got to pay for this Esri software, for LAS tools, for ERDAS Imagine, so how all that is a common good. And we're seeing how we're going to fund that. Right now we're all soft money with this grant. I think we've got good support to get some money from OVPR, Provost, or possibly the President's office to pay for a good chunk of this. Otherwise, I have to go to deans and say, hey, remember you're on that list and you've had 50 people use our courses, you need to kick in all the money. Pretty sure we'll get that support, but it's just a lot of work to do that every year. So we're going down the route of trying to get into a line item somewhere. And then we'll split out into more of a consulting service. Again, we're already doing this. We do a lot of it now for free because we've got the grant. More importantly, it's just too hard to take the money. For us to take money, we have to become an internal sales organization. We're going through that process now, and we'll have that in place before our grant runs out in 2 years. We could also become an external sales organization. It's really alluring because any money we make, we get to keep, right? So that's kind of fun. It could actually fund the common good. Two things, it's not part of our mission. We're very much support for research in the university. And two, I think we would really piss off a lot of GIS consultants out there. We've got a rich community of people doing GIS consulting work in the Twin Cities area specifically. There isn't really an open space in the market for us there to go that route, so I think we'll stick internally. With that, I will stop. See, 25 minutes, I think longer. I've got more. I could get into projects, but I want to stop here if there's questions about U-Spatial and that's working or.
I'm just wondering about helping people who have disabilities with some of the features of these software packages that aren't friendly. Again, people who perhaps can't master the double click for whatever reason, or whose visual problems are upsetting.
We haven't had to address that yet. It hasn't come up. I think we would work with our disability services to collaborate with them to come up with how do we make the tools and the information available.
If you were to go external, and this goes back to my earlier question,
Yeah.
are there restrictions on what you can do in the private sector? Because usually the idea is that since you have student labor, you have an unfair advantage over them.
Yeah, we can set up an external sales organization. We would have to charge market rates. We cannot charge our students out at $20 an hour. They're more than that. They're $40 an hour with tuition, which would still be way undercutting the market. We cannot do that. That said, that's why you could bring in a lot of money, because our labor costs are cheaper than professional services.
Yeah, I was just, this is organizational, where you fit in and all that. So right now, you're under the research dean, the research office. You think it's gonna stay there, or, and the other thing I'm wondering about is how this relates to the central IT. I forget what they call that, but I've been interacting over the years with them too.
Yeah.
So that's assuming this is gonna continue going, because it looks like it's on a pretty good track.
Yeah, I'm sure it will continue going, and I'm sure we'll get some funding to do it, or as I'm starting to tell them, I'll just, I'm the one who's going to go away. I'm really the only full-time staff person. I'll go get a job somewhere, I'll be fine. But I really like it there, so I want to stay. We're under OVPR, which fits really well with our research mission, and we've been conflicted with that because we're getting a little bit more into teaching. So I could see maybe appointment with the provost's office, or even up into the president's office somewhere. Research seems to work really well. We've been a little resistant to OIT. There are OIT people in here? IT person. It's a much more rigorous structure that we would have to fit into. We have a lot of freedom and flexibility to do what we need as an independent center, as opposed to a line item in our OIT. But if it needed to go there for funding wise, we'd make it work.
So the question we had, or I have for you is that, so when you started out, you said there were two professors?
Two faculty in geography, yeah.
That beat the sidewalks and
We're really
pounded on doors?
champions, yeah,
To get funding?
to get
It was
funding.
primarily for funding? So the support for your U-Spatial was there amongst the campuses and departments? It was just now a matter of seeking funding to take it to the next level?
Right, to actually provide the central, really what U-Spatial provided from the funding is the center core services, the help desk, the training. None of that existed. That was not there. Everybody kept saying, yes, we need to do this. We need that central help desk. We need a central place for people to ask questions or get training. And everybody had the idea, but without the funding, it never was going to get created.
But how many people were, before the funding came to be, how many people were part of your group? How big was your organization before funding?
Yeah, so U-Spatial was nothing, but there's about 87 people who got together and talked about GIS.
87?
And remote sensing, yeah. But there was no coordination between anybody. You'd get together, you'd talk about the research, you'd say, we should work together, we should set up an Arc server together, and then it never really happened because there was no, you almost need this, and I think a staff level to kind of pull it all together. For somebody who's focused more on the administrative side of it as opposed to the research, because you get busy with the research and you go and do what you need to do. There's 13 different departments. There was probably 25 people who signed off and gave letters of support and said, we need to do this. And that was the key kind of core who got it going. but it was Steve and Francis who really beat the pavement and got people to do it. Yeah, one back there. And
Is that 87 people within the main U campus, or is that external campuses?
it would be the Twin Cities and Duluth on that list.
Okay.
We've recently brought Crookston in, and Morris
They're not.
are much more active than they ever were. But the original list was probably 85 people, Twin Cities, 2 in Duluth. Duluth does a lot of GIS. And it's a huge program up there with the remote natural resource based.
How does your help desk work in practice?
Good question. We have about 85% of our contacts come via email. So they just drop an email to U-Spatial at umn.edu. They make a request. If it's something simple, we just deal with it on email, and out it goes. We get about 10% are phone calls. People call us up and say, I'm stuck with this. The number of phone calls goes up as we get closer to the end of the semester. It's really interesting. And the timelines get shorter, so you know that. And then there's a couple people who walk in. They find our office on the West Bank, and they walk in. We actually made the decision to tie into our Office of Information Technology's ticket tracking system. So we do tickets, which has been really great because we share tickets with OIT. If we get questions of how do I install ArcGIS on my work computer, boom, it goes over to the workstation support group right away because we can't do that type of thing. But if they get a question on student wants an ArcGIS license, they kick it over to us, so that's worked really well. We typically try to spend less than 4 hours on a call. We've had some flexibility now. Again, that's where we're kind of feeling some growing pains as we really are starting to enforce that. And a help desk call really is helping somebody. It's teaching them how to do something. As soon as it turns into the conversation of, hey, will you just code these 500,000 addresses for us? That's a consulting project at that point, and they need to start being funded for it.
I was going to go back to the student help question. We were talking about that over lunch. So how do you bring students in? Because it sounds like there's quite a bit of student labor in your operation.
Yeah. Well, we've got a master's of GIS, so we've got a good pool of students who come in. A lot of them with really good skills, certainly with good skills after the first year. And we work really well with that. Howard mentioned on the faculty with that, so that actually helps. I see everybody in the orientation class. Some people don't like it, but I tend to stay the really good ones right away. I mean, why not, right? So yeah, we've been encouraging that. Through the workshops, though, I think we're getting a lot of students. We see this a lot in public health, or I see this a lot in college design, where that one day doesn't give them enough knowledge to go ahead and do everything, but they figure it out and just keep going after that, and that's the push they need. We'll provide a little bit of help with them, to them to keep going, and then they become the expert on their project, depending on what they need to do. We're also starting to push people towards using web-based services that more often than not is Arcgis Online, doesn't need to be. But that's a lot easier entry point for somebody doing research, for doing basic spatial analysis and focusing on the desktop. And there.
Do you actually try to manage an Arc Online for Organizations account down to all students on campus who want it?
Yes. Anybody who asks for it will get it. Right now that I flashed it up there, I think there's 200, it's not that big yet, 240 some named users on our subscription. We've enabled the enterprise authentication part of it, so using our shibboleth, our X500 is what it's called. They still have to be invited. There is a choice within Arcgis Online that says anybody with X500 in our case could sign on. That really scares me. If anybody work with credits and how that works with Arcgis Online, you can't do that yet.
So I was going to ask if you had a deployment plan or some way of allocating credits, but I'll I'll contact you. That's
Yeah,
that's
it's
a big organization.
I actually have some slides on that, and I know I'm not going to get to that one, but we decided just to jump in and go for it. Esri's always said that if you use your credits, they'll give you more. So far, we've asked 5 times, and they've always given us more. So that's not a sustainable plan, I know it. But we're going to keep going with it for a while. We're trying to be really good about how we're using credits. We're creating a geocoding service this summer, so we'll do all that on our side instead of using credits. Tiling, we do any kind of map tiling locally, so we're not, those are the 2 big things that burn credits. So we're trying to be responsible with it, partnering with them, but it's still easy for somebody to just go in there and say, geo-enrich the entire United States at the census block level, and there goes the credits. Yeah.
Do you support open source products as much as you support Esri?
We try to. We do a lot of work with QGIS. We've been doing some leaflet work. We're big into open geoportal. I like to say we right source. We try to go between Arc and between the open source, whichever's going to work best for the project.
So I worked at an applied research center that actually was on the opposite side of the spectrum from you, and I feel like it was all external funding. And they failed early on because they had a business model that did compete with the private sector. And I see you on the opposite end of that, kind of scared to go that direction. I feel like you guys are going to be going on a collision course.
Yeah.
They had to rethink their business plan because they failed. And there is a mission with the university to be external and to bring back to the community. And what they began to do is they began to see how can we bring university research and university programs to local communities. So it's almost started off as an outreach sort of thing. What it became was they weren't competing with the private sector. The private sector wasn't doing that.
Right.
The private sector wasn't using the new research that was happening at the university. What they were doing is not competing with them, but bringing some new ideas and new technologies. And oftentimes what ended up happening is those very private sector groups or companies weren't doing that, but wanted to know more and actually ended up working with them together rather than against each other. And now they're moving toward the middle. I can see a similar thing happening here, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Just because of the vast amount of outreach you already have built into this program. And I can kind of see it dribbling over the sides of becoming to kind of put little seeds out there externally for you. And I think it's going to begin with the students, because you're growing these little flowers here. They're going to be going out into different places, right? And then they're going to be bringing this all back to you one day.
You're absolutely right. I mean, and we're already seeing that. I mentioned we're working with the State Department of Education to help train teachers. That's really out of our focus somewhat. We work with a lot of, collaborate with a lot of centers here at the university that are in the business of commercializing products. Fully support that, going that way. I think when I say we're not going to open up as a GIS consulting shop and create web maps for companies and things like that. I do think there's some expertise at the university that some of the private companies don't have. And maybe that's a place where we fit in. We're not opposed to going after external grants on our own, to bring in projects. We've found that it's far better for us to be a support role in grants, to be written in as sometimes as a PI, often as just key personnel, to provide that spatial component and let the domain experts be the PIs on it, and that works really well. And I think that's the model that's going to need to work for us. I don't want to go after grant money continually to run the center. I think that just takes too much time. Oh, we had a question first.
So I'm wondering what kind of resistance you guys encountered when you first tried to set U-Spatial up. I mean, presumably there were people on campus already who were maybe doing consulting, or perhaps there were groups on campus who really, felt like they wanted to be the gatekeeper of certain types of knowledge or instruction and associated with that. So did you encounter that?
Mm-hmm.
How did you succeed in getting over that wall and moving forward?
Yeah.
Is that a question I need to ask Steve? Or?
Yeah, ask Steve and Francis before I got on, but I certainly experienced that when I started. I also used to have a slide that said, and we do lots of meetings. It was a lot of just meetings, working with people, explaining to them what we're trying to do. What really helped when we took the simple GIS questions away from them, or offered, actually, we didn't come in and say, hey, we're gonna be here, if somebody asks you what a shapefile is, send them to us, you have to do that. We took the exact opposite approach and said, we're here, if you wanna send people, great, if you don't, you don't have to. And that quickly resolved a lot of the resistance. We've been very careful. I think if we were to do an external sales organization, I think that would offend some other groups. We've got several units that do external sales. That's actually a good point why we wouldn't want to do that as well. Most of the big groups are part of U-Spatial. I mean, we've got them in the original funding space. There are groups that are just out there on their own and we don't.
So there are still some of those that exist.
Oh, yeah.
Does Minnesota have any policy on whether or not classified research is permitted?
By classified, you mean privacy?
No, I mean like government security classifications.
I don't know. I've not looked at anything like that.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because so much mapping and imagery
Yeah.
still is considered classified.
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that. Or I don't work with any researchers who are.
Any final questions for Lance? Thanks very much.
Thanks,
Lance.
yes, for fun.